Hey everyone, welcome back to our study of Acts as we continue again Paul's very gradual, very steady journey on to Rome. And today he gets to encounter a new figure that he is able not only to proclaim his innocence before, but also is able to proclaim the gospel for, and that is King Agrippa. So let's open with our prayer and we'll dive right into the text. Let the words of our mouths and the meditations of our hearts be always acceptable in your sight, O Lord, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. All right, so today's reading, we are on Acts chapter 25, verses 13 through 27. After several days had passed, King Agrippa and Bernice arrived at Caesarea to welcome Festus. Since they were staying there several days, Festus laid Paul's case before the king, saying, "There is a man here who was left in prison by Felix. When I was in Jerusalem, the chief priests and the elders of the Jews informed me about him and asked for a sentence against him. I told them that it was not the custom of the Romans to hand over anyone before the accused had met the accusers face to face and had been given an opportunity to make a defense against the charge. So when they met here, I lost no time, but on the next day took my seat on the tribunal and ordered the man to be brought. When the accusers stood up, they did not charge him with any of the crimes that I was expecting. Instead, they had certain points of disagreement with him about their own religion and about a certain Jesus who had died, but whom Paul asserted to be alive. Since I was at a loss how to investigate these questions, I asked whether he wished to go to Jerusalem and be tried there on these charges. But when Paul had appealed to be kept in custody for the decision of his imperial majesty, I ordered him to be held until I could send him to the emperor. Agrippa said to Festus, I would like to hear the man myself. Tomorrow, Festus said, you will hear him. So on the next day, Agrippa and Bernice came with great pomp, and they entered the audience hall with the military tribunes and the prominent men of the city. Then Festus gave the order, and Paul was brought in. Festus said, King Agrippa and all here present with us, you see this man about whom the whole Jewish community petitioned me, both in Jerusalem and here, shouting that he ought not to live any longer. But I found that he had done nothing deserving death. And when he appealed to his imperial majesty, I decided to send him. But I have nothing definite to write to our sovereign about him. Therefore I have brought him before all of you, and especially before you, King Agrippa, so that after we have examined him, I may have something to write, for it seems to be unreasonable to send a prisoner without indicating the charges against him. So today's lesson is the transition text as we go from between Paul's statement in front of Festus, who was the next level, or as they say, parallel level with Felix, because Felix left, Festus took over, and now he's going up the chain again to Agrippa before he heads to Rome. And he actually, in tomorrow's, or I should say Monday's reading, will testify before Agrippa. But a few things do need to be said about the reading for today. So when we left off yesterday, Festus, if you remember, tried this little trick where, although he was very adamant that I, as the governor, procurator, will decide where this trial takes place, you Jews will not tell me where it will be, I also will try to placate them just to get all of this off my plate and try to make a little trick with Jesus to invite him to go up to Jerusalem for this trial. Excuse me, I said Jesus, Paul. And enough coffee apparently this morning, tries to get Paul to accede to want to go up to Jerusalem. Paul immediately sees through that facade and in essence charges him with saying, you know that that is not appropriate. and recognizes implicitly in the text that he's not going to find this sort of exoneration and be able to testify with complete faithfulness in front of Festus, so he appeals directly to the emperor. Well, now today's passage is sort of it's again CYA, cover you know what. For Festus in this case, Felix has been doing that, trying to play out Paul's imprisonment for his own benefit. And also, we know again from historical sources that he was getting in some trouble with not only Rome but with the local Jewish leadership. So Festus is in, wants to get this done, but then once he realizes that Paul's not going to go along and play the political game here, so Festus continues the political game from a different angle and invites Agrippa and his wife Bernice to come in. I should say his sister Bernice. I always make that mistake of saying his wife, it's his sister. And I'll say more about that here in just a second. With Festus being the new procurator, they come to pay tribute. Just like with King Herod and Pontius Pilate in the Gospels, there is a mutual respect there, but technically Herod, and in this case Herod Agrippa II, has the authority over the procurator, even though Festus is a pagan. He is not Jewish at all. Agrippa himself is from at least comes from a house that has secular Jewish ties. His sister Bernice is very much a Jew in that sense. And so she, while not practicing more like a secular Jew, Agrippa, who doesn't really claim it at all, Bernice, who does, come and they pay respects to Festus in his new office. And Festus says, oh, by the way, I have this problem I want to let you know about. Festus, like Pontius Pilate, wants to wash his hands of the whole affair. He was trying basically to get rid of the Jewish problem, that is, the Jews angry about this man. And when Paul didn't cooperate, he's basically going to manipulate Agrippa to say either you do something with this man, or if you declare him innocent and send him off to Rome, then you can take the political heat for this. Wise, savvy politicians know glad that nothing ever changes. So Agrippa is Agrippa II. So the Agrippa, of course, the last Agrippa that we saw earlier in Acts was the one who traveled up and was trying to resolve an issue among the people of Sidon, if you recall that, and the realm of Phoenicia, who were complaining that they were not getting proper administrative oversight from the king. And Agrippa I sat and spoke to them from his royal seat. He was proclaimed to be a god, and then he basically died and was consumed by worms. Remember that lovely image? So this is his son, from what I've gathered from historical details. Bernice, though importantly, is his sister, also the child of Agrippa I. Bernice's husband died, and so we know from outside historical sources that they lived together. Now, I slip up and call her his wife because there were all sorts of rumors about what was going on between Agrippa II and his sister. And sometimes I just sort of default back to some of those stories I've read about them. So all that matters for this story, besides giving you that juicy bit of historical detail, was that Agrippa and Bernice are symbols of the fact that, yes, they have nominal Jewish ties. They are very much of that unrepentant side of Judaism, but they're not actively unrepentant. Rather, their feet are firmly implanted in the Gentile world. And so they play an important part in the narrative here, even if it seems superfluous that after Festus is said, go to Caesar, that they show up and Paul spends some time in front of them. But it is that now Paul's going in front of these people who have one foot in the Jewish world, one foot in the Gentile world. And so when he starts getting sent to Rome in our lessons to come, he's being done so now officially by the purely Gentile procurator, but technically the Jewish king of the realm of Palestine. So that's the significance of why that they show up here, and why Luke includes this story. It's a nice story, but you always ask yourself, why is this story included as a part of the narrative? So Festus discussed Paul's case with the king and lays it out before him, said, there is a man left here by Felix who's been left in prison. He doesn't say it necessarily throw Felix under the bus. He's just saying, I have this problem. Felix never really figured out what to do with him, left him in for 2 years by the law. Festus, if nothing else, is very focused on obeying the law, certainly at least from outward appearance. I've got to do something with him. That's what he's telling Agrippa. He says, when I was in Jerusalem, the chief priests and the elders informed him about me and wanted me to pass sentence on him. I said, by the law, it was not our custom as the Romans to hand over anyone before the accused had met the accusers face to face and had been given an opportunity to make a defense against the charge, which, ironically, that he has been presented before the mob. Then he was presented in front of the Sanhedrin by Felix, and they just about, or he's in front of Lysias, the tribune. They about stoned him or tried to kill him again the separate time. So he has been presented in front of all these different groups. So he's had his chances for trials. And according to Felix and according to Festus, now there's really nothing that this man has done to warrant any punishment. He allowed the case to be brought before him, and he just repeats again, wash, rinse, repeat, the same cycle that we've heard before. As we heard yesterday, they did not charge him with any of the crimes that I was expecting. And again, the cogent point here for the Romans throughout all of this is in verse 19. Instead, they had certain points of disagreement with him about their own religion and about a certain Jesus who had died, but whom Paul asserted to be alive. The scandal of scandals, the scandal, of course, for many of the Jews, particularly those of the priestly elite who are the Sadducees, who don't believe in the resurrection. Also, as we're going to hear from Festus tomorrow, really part of the scandal to the Romans, because that's just pure nonsense to the Romans to hear that a man died and was resurrected. That's just doesn't fit into any of the pantheon of the Greek or Roman gods, not into any of the pagan religion. It's just something that's considered to be a fanciful tale, to put it mildly. So you get the sense that Festus kind of has this about Paul's position, but otherwise, while not sympathetic to Paul, seems to recognize that Paul's an innocent man and deserves the protection of the law. So Festus goes on, since I was at a loss how to investigate these questions, I asked whether he wished to go to Jerusalem and be tried there on these charges. Festus, again on the surface, saying I was trying to be expedient in getting this done. Yesterday, though, we got the sense that he's really sort of doing this just to really placate the Jews and get this off his plate. He's not said that outright, but you really get in the action of it a little bit more of the tone that I'm just going to pander to this audience who's already fussing and about on the verge of creating an uprising against me because they weren't happy with how Felix handled it. Let's just placate them and get on with this. But he just simply states the facts here to Agrippa. And then says, when Paul had appealed to be kept in custody for the decision of his imperial majesty, I ordered him to be held until I could send him to the emperor. So that's where we are. Paul's basically in a holding pattern, waiting to be officially dispatched off to Rome. But Agrippa, just like with Herod with John the Baptist, well, actually King Herod the Great, with the wise men who wanted to hear in Matthew's gospel about the story of who is this Jesus that these magi are telling me of, go so that I can go pay homage to him too. Then Herod Antipas, his successor, who was the Herod that was around for the execution of both John the Baptist and Jesus, had always a very love-hate relationship with John the Baptist, and then also seemingly had this fascination with Jesus as well. And so we see here that Herod Agrippa II also has this fascination with those who were prophets who were carrying the message. and in large part because they were Jewish and had enough knowledge of the law, even though it was purely knowledge, at least as it was proclaimed through the scriptures, to have some fascination to want to learn more. Again, this sense of wonderment that spells not belief, but this sense at least that something about these words, this man, this gospel has opened up some sort of curiosity. So Agrippa wants to hear him, and Festus said, "Tomorrow you shall." Well, this is a private hearing, but you wouldn't gather that from the way that people come in. In verse 23, it says, Agrippa and Bernice came with great pomp, fitting the king. Again, king's a technical, sort of a loosely technical term in this case with Agrippa, just as it was with Agrippa the first. They entered the audience hall with the military tribunes and the prominent men of the city. So this is not Pilate and Jesus going behind the curtain and saying, having their talk behind the scenes. This is in front of pageantry. We're going to see, though, a little bit more intimate encounter between Agrippa and Paul next time that we gather. But here, this is technically a private gathering with Agrippa and his host wanting to hear Paul. So Festus brings Paul in and says, "Here is this man whom the whole Jewish community petitioned me about, shouting that he ought not to live any longer. But I found that he had done nothing deserving death. And when he appealed to his imperial majesty, I decided to send him. But I have nothing definite to write to our sovereign about him. Therefore I have brought him before all of you, and especially before you, King Agrippa, so that after we have examined him I may have something to write, for it seems to me unreasonable to send a prisoner without indicating the charges against him." Politics at its finest. So while it is a, quote, private gathering, there are enough people with enough connections present in this audience that Festus basically says, I need instructions from you, Agrippa, about what to do and what to write about this man, because I have people to answer to, and if they don't like the answer that I give them, I'm going to say it was sent by you. So there's Luke's interest in this internal politics, as I said, is number one here focused on the fact that now you have this king who is 1 foot in the Jewish world, 1 foot in the Roman world, although by all practical intents and purposes, his Judaism his Jewish heritage is ethnic and very nominal as far as even that goes. Bernice seems to have a little more interest in the practices, but even she is much more of a secular Jew than what the average Jew in Palestine was at that time. But again, for Luke's purpose, the fact that it's about Paul proclaiming the gospel, his political circumstance only helps to accentuate his theological circumstance. And that is that Paul claimed the word in every way he knows possible. And he has claimed several times, I am innocent. I stand here with a clear conscience. I have done what God has told me to do. God keeps sending me into these different forums to proclaim the word that he has sent me to proclaim, and I will continue doing that, even if it means that I'm doing it as a condemned man who does not deserve condemnation, doing it in chains, who continues to do it despite the fact that all of this opposition is mounting against me. I continue to go forth in front of the people that God has called me to go forward to. And so really, you're beginning to see this whole litany of characters that fulfills every single different group of people that Paul could possibly proclaim this message to. As he was proclaiming it to the Gentiles, he's proclaimed it to the church in Jerusalem, which has given him a favorable hearing. He's proclaimed it in front of the religious leadership of the temple in Jerusalem, which obviously has not given him a favorable hearing. And he's proclaimed it in front of Gentile military, in front of Gentile political figures, and now in front of Gentile/Jewish royalty, all to set up the proclamation that's going to come as he prepares to go to Rome. So, like I said, this is a transition passage, but one that really does help broaden the spectrum of where God is calling Paul, to whom God is calling Paul to proclaim the gospel, and sets up the path that after, in a couple of days, he will finally start on his journey to Rome and begin his great proclamation of the gospel as he goes along and then finally once he arrives. So, with that being said, that will end us for today. I do want to invite you to read on for our next time, and this is being Saturday. That means Monday will be our next time together. And our lessons for Monday will be Acts chapter 26, verses 1 through 23. So please read that as Paul begins to testify in front of Agrippa, and we begin to see again the march to Rome continue. My friends, I hope you have a wonderful weekend. The peace of the Lord be with you, and I'll see you soon. Take care.